Let's go to Adam O.
All right, let's do it.
And right now, to join us on the Orange Pill podcast, we have Adam O, also known as Denver, also known as Adam, and he is the head of business development at Upstream Data Incorporated. Adam, welcome to Orange Pill podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be here and talk with you guys. You're both legends in my mind, so absolutely ecstatic to connect.
Oh, cool.
That's why we invited you on to tell us these good words.
Oh, yeah, I'm feeling the love. I'm loving it. Let me ask you this, Adam O. So give the folks a breakdown. Upstream Data is what? What do you do over there?
So we're a company. We build data centers and as well as engines. So we work with oil and gas operators and build them the infrastructure required, high quality data centers for them to use out in the oil field in order to bring their stranded methane to market. Right. So a lot of oil and gas operators are out there flaring gas. They can now bring that gas to market profitably. In fact, it's quite profitable with current Bitcoin prices. But there are some practical and issues involved with that. These need to be all weather kind of data centers, and you need to generate power on site. And so we just build data centers to different scales for oil and gas operators that are looking to, instead of flare their gas, they're looking to bring it to market and actually turn it into a revenue stream.
Okay, go deeper into that. Stranded energy, what is it? And let's actually apply it to a real world example, because we've been talking about Nigeria. Nigeria just recently banned its banks from allowing any citizens or companies within Nigeria from using cryptocurrencies. So, Nigeria is, you think of Nigeria and you think of the images of all that flaring going on, causing local environmental disasters. But what opportunity costs are they missing there? How much money could they be making, basically using that flaring to mine Bitcoin instead?
Well, a significant amount. I mean, a lot of these guys have really clean methane gas, right? They in the oil field, they call it sweet gas. And the reason that they don't sell it, the reason that they're burning it is because it's just not economically feasible to bring it to market, right? So, and what that means is it may not be a really great quantity of gas, but it's really high quality gas. And so due to the fact that there's not, an insane quantity, to build a pipeline to try and then, bring that gas to market, the ROI is just very unattractive, right? You have to spend millions of dollars on a pipeline, all the bureaucratic loophole or hoops you have to jump through. And it's an absolute, it's a nonsensical investment to try to pipeline it into infrastructure. So ultimately what they're left with is either they can shut the well in, right? Or they can produce crude and they just burn the gas. And so they have nothing else to do with this gas. They can't sell it. And now with Bitcoin mining, right, they can effectively bring it to market quite efficiently by generating computational work on site and just, mining Bitcoin. And so in a way, it's just a means by which for them to sell gas, direct to consumer, if you will.
Right. So this is one of the unique things about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining is that it is portable. And so what you're describing there is something new in the energy business. As you are talking about it there, the energy is local. And to get this gas to market, you have to build a whole infrastructure, and therefore it's not profitable, but it's good quality, clean gas. So the Bitcoin mining is portable. We see this, what you're describing there. We also see this in China. There's a seasonal effect in China with Bitcoin as the portable miners go from hydro to other forms of energy as well. So this kind of plays into the idea that Bitcoin mining and the Bitcoin usage of energy is incredibly efficient, and therefore, Adam, you start to talk about in terms of it being energy efficient and therefore almost, overlapping a conversation about it being green energy almost, right?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I would say it's one of the greenest innovations to happen in the oil and gas space. I mean, one of the biggest ways in which, oil and gas operators impact the environment is through flaring gas. Because a flare is not very efficient oftentimes, right? And the reason they flare the gas is because to vent it into the atmosphere is really bad, right? Methane is 50, 60 times worse as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So, but with a flare, oftentimes, the flare is only 50, 65% efficient. And so you're still venting a percentage of that methane into the atmosphere. When you go in and you end up, essentially capping that flare because you're going to consume it, that the ROI per dollar spent in terms of the environmental impact is unparalleled. I mean, mainstream environmental initiatives don't even compare to the dollar ROI on the environment that we can get by mining Bitcoin in this specific arena. And so that's why we're building for these operators. And beyond that, you're right about it being portable, being modular, and that's a really important aspect, right? That the actual infrastructure can be quite portable, quite modular. But beyond that, Bitcoin is very flexible, right? It's not like a Google server where if you go down, it's absolute disaster, right? So you can constantly be fluctuating how much you're mining with how much you're producing, and there's no really inherent or practical loss in that process. So Bitcoin is kind of this perfect mechanism by which to utilize any energy that can't be economically brought to market. It's the perfect tool for delivering that energy to market, and with very minimal loss, right? Because we've gotten to the point where these hardware devices, these ASICs that people mine with, are really efficient. I mean, even the S9s are pretty darn efficient when you look at it from like a thermodynamic conversion point of view. And so ultimately what we're talking about is one of the greatest tools that's ever been leveraged in the oil and gas space. And we're just starting to see it be leveraged because, people are just coming around. Price is a powerful manipulator of opinion. And, Bitcoin at $50,000, it's, people are talking about it, people are looking at it. So I'd say, yeah, Max, it's really green.
Right. So you're saying there, of all the initiatives out there, the green initiatives, carbon and cap trading, or the various programs, there's nothing more efficient right now than the conversion of flaring gas to Bitcoin mining. I mean, if you take a country like Nigeria, they've got an incredible flaring gas all over the country, and I would imagine that single location alone is contributing significantly to greenhouse gases. Methane, which is actually a lot more greenhouse gas-like than carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
And so let me also get this straight. So you're at Upstream Data, and you're talking about data. So you're basically in the oil and gas industry. You're supplying data to the oil and gas industry, but you're giving them. It's almost like Moneyball. Big data, we saw that film Moneyball, where it's big data applied to baseball. You're big data of oil and gas. Is that a fair characterization, or have I lost my mind?
Well, no, I mean, I think it's somewhat of a characterization. Maybe somewhat accurate, right? I think the only part of that translation that maybe gets lost is, rather than being very complicated, right? We build really practically, right? We build practical structures that are intuitive to these oil and gas engineers, right? The founder of Upstream Data, Steve Barber, who's an awesome guy. He's a big fan of you, Max. He made sure that I would mention that. I think he's a petroleum engineer. He's an oil and gas guy by trade. And so he's built structures in the oil and gas space for on-site use his whole life. And so he just builds a practical structure that these oil and gas guys will be able to understand how to use. And then we go through and we teach them, hey, this is how to set up, a mining pool. This is why you'd want to use firmware. We're kind of just hold their hand as they kind of dip their toe into this new technology, right? But ultimately, this is just a tool for them. And so we're just building them the tools to sell gas, right? Sell gas that they otherwise were either losing money on or just wasn't making them any money. So it's just a real practical application. It's crazy.
So also presumably a few things I have. Okay. Locals often are very against fracking in their area because of the flaring and things like that. So this presumably reduces that problem quite significantly. Secondly, I'm assuming that these oil and gas guys then have to learn a little bit about ASICs and stuff because ASICs do go down often. So, what happens? Or do you guys have to repair that like when they go down? And Texas, we saw recently just with these huge storms, their whole energy grid was taken offline. And there are, of course, loads of Bitcoin miners down there. And we have friends who are Bitcoin miners down there, and they shut down their Bitcoin operations. As you say, it's very flexible. They shut it down and they sold their energy back to the grid. So answer all those questions. You get a lot there.
Yeah. So starting off, I guess, as a solution to this problem, I think what's the greatest part about this solution is that it doesn't need to be something the regulators come out and make people do, right? There's a natural incentive for these oil and gas operators to do this because there's an economic incentive, there's a financial incentive, right? So they're actually financially incentivized to be mitigating their methane gas because they might as well be bringing it to market and making a buck. So that's just one point I think is worth highlighting because it's a big difference between a lot of initiatives, right? So this is a naturally occurring shift. That's a good thing. And so, yes, down in Texas with what's going on right now with the grid issue, you know, one thing I'll say that's great about this from a Bitcoin mining perspective is that this hardens Bitcoin, where the grid can go down, and I'm still mining Bitcoin, right? I found my way to Upstream Data by being a customer of Upstream Data 3 years ago, and so you know, I'm actually was doing this process before I started working for them, and one of the things I really liked about that was it's very defensive, right? It's defensive from Bitcoin's point of view, and it's also regulatorily defensive, right? I'm doing a service for the environment, and so that's one aspect that I think is going to those kinds of risk profiles are going to become more inherent and a more poignant part of a business plan and part of the risk that any miner is going to take. And I think this decade, what we're going to see is miners shift to off-grid mining because it's a much more practical and often, and most of the time, more economic way to mine Bitcoin. So I think, you know, there's that aspect, and it's partly due to that flexibility that, you know, ultimately, if you can find the best energy source, you might as well. And if you can modularize your mining, then it makes sense to move it. In terms of what's happening down in Texas and the grid going down, I have a lot of opinions on that. I mean, where would you like me to kind of start? I mean,
well, so that's interesting because the way you described it, off-grid mining, right? Like follow up on that. So you're saying like one individual fracking rig and they have the flaring and you, your service provides, like it contains that flare, you convert it into energy, you use the energy there to mine Bitcoin. So it's not taking energy from the electric grid that everybody else is. So it's not relying on that, right? So you see more of that happening.
Well, yeah, I do, because one, it's more economic, right? I mean, the further upstream that you go in the energy production process, the more economic the energy becomes typically, right? So that's why I think upstream oil and gas producers will be the biggest Bitcoin miners by the end of this decade. It just makes sense, right? They have just ungodly amounts of energy that they can't efficiently or economically bring to market, and now they can. And so, right, and so we're going to see them start to leverage it. Now, the Bitcoin price has to obviously be pretty high for all of them to get involved, right? The numbers would dictate that the Bitcoin price has to be in the multi-millions because that's how much gas we waste. We waste over a billion cubic feet a day just in the U.S. flaring.
Yeah,
right?
and I mean
it's massive.
I understand up in the Dakotas, like there's a lot of waste as well because they just don't have the pipelines. So there's and because of the higher energy, do you need like a certain grade of oil or natural gas?
Yeah, I mean, there's sour gas that would need to be severely treated before you could generate power with it, but you could still do it, right? It just adds to the economic. It just becomes a part of the economic equation now, right? It's less attractive than gas that you don't have to treat. So I think the lowest hanging fruit is this really sweet methane that's just getting lit on fire all over the country, all over North America, just for the sake of we can't make a buck trying to sell it. And so, and the environmental impact of building a pipeline has to come into consideration as well, right? If you want to have that discussion. And so this is just a perfectly practical solution for them and a good thing. In terms of Texas, I'll be short with it, but I think what Bitcoin mining is going to do is it's going to incentivize us to produce more energy. We're going to produce a lot more energy than we as humans consume because we have this secondary energy consumption market known as the Bitcoin network, right? So before we could only sell electricity to human beings. Now we can sell it to this monetary network that you can connect to anywhere with an internet connection. So now that we see that secondary energy market is going to grow, and it's going to grow severely to a point where it's much greater than what humans are consuming. And that's a good thing because we have issues like what happens in Texas. We're going to have so much energy produced that we're going to be able to divert it and keep people warm and alive and keep businesses running. We're going to be more resilient as society, as a civilization, because we're producing more power. And we're not doing it in order to be more resilient. We're doing it to make money. We're doing it because there's an economic incentive to produce energy. But the result's going to be that we're better off. And so that's what I think is just such a powerful driver in Bitcoin. It's very subtle, but we're starting to see it pick up. We're starting to see it kind of unfold.
Right. So there's a difference between making money and the price signal. So what you're saying, what you're describing is that right now the price signal is terrible. The prices are completely misaligned in that industry relative to what you can do with Bitcoin. As the Bitcoin gets more integrated into the energy grid, price signals start to become more commensurate with what would be our optimal relationship with our energy industry as human beings. And that means less pollution. I mean, so
That means
it's
less
like a
waste.
win, less waste. So the economic incentive and the number go up technology and making money certainly is a huge part of the equation. But there's another part of it, which is that I think people just hate to see all that flaring gas. It offends us. Not only is it wasteful, but it's like, that's such a waste. Now,
It's a tragedy.
yeah, it's a tragedy. So when you harbor that and you bring it into the economy, uh, it has an effect that's satisfying all across the board. What percentage of all, we've heard different numbers here. What percentage of Bitcoin mining is from renewables? I've heard everything from 30% to 70%.
I don't know if I have a precise figure on that, but I'd say a lot. Like I'd say it would surprise me if it wasn't a majority, just because it's economically more attractive to find.
And it's definitely heading into the renewable direction. It's gaining whatever it is. It's getting
higher. And I think it's part of the competitive aspect of Bitcoin, of this side of the Bitcoin industry, because I think last decade, 2010 to 2020. Was the decade of chip development and computational efficiency, right? We were pushing the bounds that we went all the way down to 7 nanometer, which is where I think we're at today. And you didn't need cheap power to compete. You needed the next greatest machine to compete. That was the name of the game. And now that we've kind of, approached the marginal return to kind of squeeze everything we can out of efficiency, I think this decade what we're going to see is the investment dollars are going to shift towards sourcing more economic sources of energy, because the ROI per dollar on sourcing a primary energy source like flared gas is just so much more attractive than developing a 5 nanometer chip, right? And the barriers to entry are just so much lower. I mean, they're not insane. And so I think that's what we're going to see is the commoditization of the hardware, where I think by the next maybe 15 years, we'll see pretty much everybody mining with the exact same machines. And the difference maker is going to be what's your energy. And once we're there, who can compete? Who can mine the longest? And it's going to be the guys that have stranded energy that they can't bring to market. It's going to be the oil and gas operators with flared gas. Definitely are going to be in there and competing with any other miners that maybe have hydroelectric or whatever, because their cost is almost zero. Right? They're there to produce crude. This gas just happens to be coming along, and it's not a ton, but it's enough to generate a good bit of power.
Right. So there was so much in that conversation we're having there, and I like the point of the fact that how efficient Bitcoin mining process makes the energy, like this waste that you were talking about, because that's like what Buckminster Fuller said, is that there's no such thing as pollution. He said there's just waste, right? You're just wasting resources, energy that could have been used to produce something, more efficiently, and we wasted it. But also in terms of all this stranded energy, you just think of, that's the amazing thing is right now the world is set up and it creates disadvantages for some because, some regions don't have oil and gas, right? Saudi Arabia has a lot of oil and gas and they're super wealthy. Other nations don't. But all nations have something like wind or solar or the Amazon, the whole Amazon region. I mean, imagine all the hydroelectric from just the sheer volume of water flowing through there. It just feels like with what you're talking about here, that, tapping the stranded energy all over the world in some remote places, up in the Himalayas, out in Siberia, it just seems like it could help distribute Bitcoin even further and deeper out into the world.
Yeah, I think that Bitcoin mining will only become more geographically decentralized. I just do. I think inherent in kind of the process that I was talking about, how we're gonna see miners shift toward off-grid solutions, towards stranded energy sources. And I think what that will do is modularize the process. We won't see these, kind of giant facilities that are on grid. But this is the point that you were kind of getting at there, Stacy. That's, I think, is really important. Is, a lot of these intermittent energy sources, these renewables or green energy like wind and solar, from an investment point of view, they suck. I mean, they're not attractive. The ROIs are really not great on them, because they're not very efficient at bringing energy to market, at delivering, because when they're producing, oftentimes whatever market they're supplying isn't demanding electricity at that point in time. And then you have these fluctuations, and you have a ton of stranded and wasted energy in that process. But then you enter in Bitcoin mining, right? You apply Bitcoin mining to this process of a windmill or even a solar farm, and all of a sudden the investment becomes more attractive. It maybe isn't as attractive as others, but it's still much more attractive, because now you could go to an emerging community, a community in a developing country that doesn't have reliable and affordable electricity. And you could build a solar farm and provide them with reliable and affordable electricity, which improves their quality of life probably more than anything else, right? With electricity, it's possible they can have clean water and sanitation and manufacturing. And right, there's all these things that come with a reliable electric grid, a reliable electric source. And so now it's economically feasible and even attractive to go build this solar farm, because while this community is developing, and while they're advancing and beginning to use then the electricity that they can leverage, you can still make a buck. Every single watt of electricity that you generate, you can bring it to market effectively, because you can mine Bitcoin. And then as that community demands more electricity, you mine less Bitcoin, right? So you deliver every watt of electricity that you produce to market. And that all of a sudden, now it's really attractive to go build solar maybe, and build wind in places where they have no other means. Certainly it's attractive to go find oil, drill for oil and gas wells. It's attractive to go find geothermal. Everything is just much more attractive. So I think we're going to see an energy renaissance, kind of like an industrial re-revolution in the energy sector, because now it's economically so much more attractive than it was, 12 years ago.
Right. So you're talking about stranded populations, right? There are populations out there that are off the grid, but with Bitcoin mining, they then can become individually sovereign. They have their own little sovereignty going. And as you point out, that also means water and other things come with that. So will populations migrate to where they can get energy? And away from, let's say, the migration to a city, right? So if you're in a city which is highly inefficient, but you're making money, et cetera, we've seen that for 100 years. Is it going to be more decentralized, where populations will just decide to migrate to where they can get the cheapest energy, let's say a hydroelectric plant or hydroelectric or something, or solar or flaring gas? And so we have a lot more distributed, miniature populations, if you will. What do you think of this?
Yeah, that's kind of what I agree with you in that kind of a hypothesis, is that, I think we'll see less concentration of populations. We'll see, kind of what I would call maybe the explosion of small communities popping up, because it's feasible for them to. And I when it comes down to being a sovereign individual, right? I think there's a few tools we're missing. I mean, we have sovereign money, and that's fantastic. I think for the most part, we have sovereign information, sovereign communication. We're for the most part able to communicate quite freely in that way. But sovereign travel is one. So the ability to have my own personal drone. But sovereign power is one of the biggest ones that no one talks about. The ability to generate your own electricity need be. And it kind of goes back to what happened in Texas is, I think every person should have the ability to generate their own electricity. I think that's a fundamental tool, or you could call it a fundamental luxury of the first world in the society we live in today. And if we're able to give that to people, I think what we're going to see is a better world. But right now we currently have a lot of bureaucratic regulation and other rulemaking around energy production, and we get in positions where our energy stack on the grid is divided between these categories. And when one of the categories entirely fails and a percentage of the other categories also begin to fail because of extreme weather in Texas, we see an absolute disaster. We see, people without energy for electricity for 40 hours. So, I mean, I think Bitcoin in one way, shape, or form solves this problem because it incentivizes people to produce more energy than we're producing now. And that's a good thing, right?
That's an amazing way to look at it. And this episode of Orange Pill Podcast is sponsored by the Sun Exchange, which operates out of South Africa. And it's a remarkable thing because what they do is people around the world could buy solar cells that then get put on the roofs of various schools across South Africa, the remote schools, cutting their costs. This remote school will have their energy costs cut hugely because the South African energy grid is pretty dilapidated and it's all coal based, by the way, which is from another century. So here they get the solar grid. But what you're saying is, of course, there's a lot of energy waste because, if you don't consume it all at the peak, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., at the peak of the sun, if you're not using it all, then it just gets wasted. So you're saying you could balance it out. Would Upstream Data, does your service, I know you work with oil and gas, but does it also work with that sort of situation where you have any energy provider, whether it's hydroelectric, oil and gas, or solar, if there's energy that's not being used by customers, then it could be used to mine Bitcoin?
Yeah, our data centers could be plugged in from any primary energy source. We just work with oil and gas operators because they're the ones that, right now I think they're the ones feeling the most pain and in need of this tool the most. And we, that's our company's field is oil and gas. That's where the company was born. And so, plus we also build engines that utilize nat gas to generate electricity. So that's what we specifically build for. But our data centers, yeah, they could be used all over. That's part of the windfall of Bitcoin is that even these oil and gas producers, we look at it like, hey, this is a tool you're going to have on your balance sheet, and you're going to move these things around. You're going to have it on a well, and maybe you're fracking that well or producing it or whatever, and you're going to use that gas. But if the gas depletes off of it, right? You can just pick the thing up and go drop it on another well, plumb into the flare line, and you're back up and running. And now you're, stopping gas from over here. And so, I think some of the permanent infrastructure that comes with bringing energy to market that exists in oil and gas is commonplace. But now it doesn't make sense to build permanent infrastructure in this regard. You don't want to build permanent infrastructure by the well because the well might deplete, right? You want to be able to pick up that Bitcoin mine, drop it off somewhere else, and get going. And so that's kind of how we look at it. It's just something that they can leverage. And before they usually had to build an LNG facility, which is a massive structure, for the most part permanent, or a pain in the butt to demolish. And not always would they get their money back. I mean, so I think it's gonna reshape how energy is produced, because now we have this secondary market to think about. We have this thing called the Bitcoin network that we can sell our energy to. So we need to think about that when we make our decisions in how we're going to produce energy. It's going to change every every decision the guys make. So no matter what they're producing.
Right. Should the U.S. be mining Bitcoin and getting involved with Bitcoin as a strategic reserve? Because I notice that some countries now, whether it's Iran or Venezuela or a few others, they're starting to mine and hoard Bitcoin as a strategic reserve. It seems, does the U.S. have an advantage there? In other words, does the U.S. have an advantage in terms of their cost of energy? I understand that in Texas now the cost is pretty low. And is this an opportunity that the U.S. should be doing right now while we still have its shot at being competitive globally in the Bitcoin space? Adam.
Yes, I think they should. I mean, absolutely, I think they should. And we are more than capable of competing. I think ultimately it may seem like we're late in the game to Bitcoin mining. And, sometimes I have to remind myself, I think we're in the first inning. I mean, still, because the semiconductor space is so bottlenecked and it's essentially a monopoly, if not, I mean, it's an oligopoly, but it's so constrained right now that, I mean, even Ford is having a hard time producing trucks because they can't get chips. They can't get semiconductors to produce their trucks. And so I think what would even be more beneficial, what I would like to see more than I'd like to see the US government begin mining Bitcoin, is I'd like to see the US government get really serious about erecting a foundry or multiple foundries throughout the United States to produce semiconductors, to produce chips, right? And because there's a massive silicon production problem that is just, it's killing the ability for Bitcoin miners to really evolve. There's just not enough machines being produced right now. So ultimately, I think where we're at today is we're essentially at full deployment, where any hardware that's out there in the market is plugged in because it's profitable to plug it in at most all average electricity rates because of the Bitcoin price. And yet we're still not seeing the hash rate go crazy. And I think that's because supply constraints. There's not enough miners being produced. And so, we need to get serious about producing computer chips. We need to get serious about building foundries in the US. That's, I think, step one. At that point, I don't even know if the government in the US needs to get involved, because the energy companies in the US are going to get involved. The oil and gas companies are going to get involved. And there's going to be massive mining in North America. I mean, I'm talking with guys every day, oil and gas producers, and even other guys that have stranded energy sources. And there are so many people turning to monetize their stranded energy. It's going to happen.
So you're suggesting, hash rate's going to go up. You say it's constrained right now because of lack of chips, chip shortages. If the chip shortages are addressed, and so where's hash rate going? It's currently at about 160 quintillion calculations per second. However you want to describe that, terahash, et cetera. Where's it going?
Well, I mean, I think it'll probably double by the end of the year, because there's some production that's going to be landing into the market around, I think June, July, August, and then some more toward the end of the year. Bitmain's coming out with their S19 Pro. But in terms of by the end of the decade, I mean, I don't think we're going to be measuring in exahashes, which is what, exahashes is what we're measuring in right now. We're not going to be measuring in exahashes for very long. I mean, it'll be zeta hashes, then yotta hashes. And I think we'll be to yotta hashes before 2035, which is a massive jump from here. But I just see it because I see the demand, and the Bitcoin price will lead the way. That will be the main driver. And because let's step back in terms of the supply shortage, right? So it's not a matter of supply shortage because maybe there's not enough material or something like that. The supply shortage really comes from capacity. So the amount of chips that we can produce on Earth at any given time is just limited right now, right? Due to these foundries. But then you take a look at Bitcoin miners, the actual companies producing these machines. They have to compete with companies like Apple and Samsung and Intel for foundry space to produce the chips. So in order to compete with those companies who can get a ton of money for the chips they produce, in their iPhones or whatever, they have to produce something that they can sell for a massive amount of money and really, try to get an ROI, because it's going to cost them so much just to get the chip produced. And so that's really that economic, speed bump that's occurring right now. Is Bitmain and these other miner producers, they have to compete with guys that can get way more money out of the silicon chips that they produce than Bitmain can. And so that's the issue, is that there needs to be more capacity of production so that industry isn't so cutthroat to get space on the foundry line to get chips actually printed. And so that's a massive problem, and it's a national security problem. I mean, the military's having problem getting chips. This is a way bigger than Bitcoin mining, but that needs to happen first before this industry can mature.
I mean, and interestingly, we always talk about the fiat dark ages and all the bad decisions that happened because of the fiat dark ages, whereas this hard money of Bitcoin is creating or causing or forcing all these better decisions to be made. And one of the problems with the US for these foundry issues is that we used to provide like over 50% of the world's chip supply, but now it's all financialization. So spending any money on any assets or any research and development or building that you're going to be punished as an executive. You have to instead spend the money buying back shares. So it's hard to even build a factory here without getting punished by shareholders. But this could be forced this situation. But in the last few moments here, I want to ask, like, when Yoda arrives, when these Yoda hash arrives, you know, the vision I'm seeing is like right now, like when I think of the biggest miners, like there's tens of thousands of ASICs that they have in giant facilities out in Texas or China or Canada or somewhere near a hydroelectric plant. So you're seeing, like, when we get to that Yoda level, I have to say it. I don't know. I like the word.
No, it's great.
So that it's going to be thousands of rigs all over the world, like having, like, how many do you put on one fracking rig? Like, is it like 10, 20, 100, 1,000? Like, how many ASICs?
I mean, it depends on how much gas they have, right? I mean, that's really what you measure it up to, is how much gas do you want to get rid of, you know, and we see guys that just have wells that are, you know, they have 100,000 cubic feet a day, which might sound like a lot, but it's not. 100 MCF, and we'll go up there and we'll, you know, get a generator mounted in a data center, and they'll consume almost all of that flare. And they can produce a good amount of power on that. They can produce, you know, 300 kilowatts, third of a megawatt. You know, not a ton, but these guys have there are tens of thousands of these wells all over the United States and Canada. I mean, it can add up to, you know, multiple megawatts really quickly because they have so much gas. It's just, you know, there's some CapEx decision making that needs to take place, and it's a slower process. You know, these guys are slow to move. I want to say too, the oil and gas industry, the people I work with every day are some of the greatest people I've ever met. I got into the oil and gas industry in early 2018, and it was only maybe 60 days that I realized I wanted to work in the oil and gas industry the rest of my life, because these people are of the highest integrity. They're hard workers. They don't want to pry in your business. They just, you know, they want to be left alone. They want to work hard and raise a family, and you know, don't want anybody to tell them what to do. And I think, and they're just good people. And they're being villainized by, you know, mainstream media, by pretty much, you know, anybody that has an opinion, villainizes oil and gas as this horrible, dirty industry. And they're not. I mean, these guys don't want to destroy the planet at all. Right. They're stewards of it. And so I think this Bitcoin mining, you know, topic and the way in which Bitcoin mining helps these guys be more environmentally friendly and efficient, gives them a way to prove that they help make the world go round. That without them, we're all Texas right now, right? Without them, we're all toast.
But also, like, the two most primary basic physics that rule the whole entire universe are time and energy. And you know, Bitcoin is a way to make that, like, capture it and harmonize it with all of our lives. Because like I say, fiat dark ages makes everything upside down. It tries to break the laws of physics. And we saw that with negative interest rates on money. That's negative time value. Then we saw negative prices on oil last year. Like, all those things are totally insane. Those are the insane things. Like, crazy. If people are shouting about something, they should be shouting about, like, breaking the laws of physics.
So you go to these guys and there's some upfront cost. So they have to make some decisions. And on average, when is the payoff? When do they recoup their CapEx on average? 2 years?
You know, I mean, I can't, like, guarantee kind of,
no,
you know,
but I'm just saying roughly.
I'll say today. I mean, today I ran through the numbers, you know, yesterday afternoon with the company. Yesterday we looked at a data center investment, and all in on this investment was a small investment. They were thinking, you know, it's going to be less than 60 grand for power generation miners and data center. And they'd be making like $480, $500 a day. It's 100-day ROI. Yeah. I mean, it's right. That's the Bitcoin price today, right? Because the Bitcoin price today is just crazy.
When I was working on Wall Street, we did tax shelters for the oil and gas industry for a few years. And, you know, that's something this political administration could do, is put this out to those thousands of retail traders out there. Give us a tax shelter. You know, we'll put up the money to recoup the CapEx. Give me a 2-for-1 tax write-off for 2 years. And let's get this whole industry going. America could be number one in this with some creative thinking.
Let's create it. Let's
No,
do
you're
it.
right. I mean,
There's
and that's
500,000 stockbrokers out there looking for products to sell. Give them a 2-for-1 tax write-off with a gas flare conversion Bitcoin limited partnership deal, and I'll buy some right now. I'll put the order in today.
Exactly. And that's the thing we're feeling is, we can't build fast enough. Is that we're constantly trying to help these guys out, and they're loving it. But, there's so much growth that needs to take place. There's so much gas that's wasted, and it's a really fun industry to be a part of. Like I said, the only constraint that you feel, the only I think hiccup I would call it in this process is the ASIC industry. The ASIC industry just hasn't matured the same way that the financial rails have matured in Bitcoin, the on ramps and off ramps and all those, BlockFis and those kinds of products. It's just hasn't seen the same investment and same serious growth. And it's a tragedy too. But I think with the information age, I mean, we've got to start building foundries. It's got to at some point become economic to be able to start supplying more of these chips. I don't know why that cartel has got such a tight rope on it, but it seems to be the case.
One last quick question. You've got a block clock behind you and it's flashing green every now and then. Is that signaling a new block being born, or is it the time? What is it signaling?
No, it's cycling through the different readouts, I think. So right now it's on price. So we're at 52,000. 97.
Max is just saying that because we have one here, but we can't figure out how to turn it on and make it work.
We can't get our block clock working. It just says hello.
We said
I could get it working for you.
Okay,
I can help you out.
Okay, we'll do that after this call.
Yeah, we'll get it working.
We this is us. Like, we DM NVK Rodolfo, and he just laughs at us. He just writes back, ha ha ha.
Yeah, he laughs at us.
We're like, he's like,
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah,
awesome.
He thinks we're, boomers. He's like, okay, boomer, and just won't help us.
Yeah.
So I see you're like Gen Z, so we'll have you help us out.
See, the oil and gas industry is scrappy. They're hardworking. They're ready to assist. They're come to people's aid. Not like that NVK. He's Canadian. They don't do shit up in Canada. They're all welfare bums.
On hockey skates.
They're, playing hockey and collecting government money. So we got to get some guy like Adam here who knows what the hell he's doing.
Thanks for being on.
Thanks
for being on Orange Phil.
Thanks for wearing the orange shirt. Very, very suave.
Always.
Very clever.
I couldn't pass it up. I mean, it's too fun of an opportunity. One thing I did want to mention too is Max. I mean, you're such a legend in the Bitcoin space. It's so much fun to watch your videos. I mean, I have to ask you, like, where do you get that energy sometimes? I mean, does it just come to you when they hand you the microphone and you just start actually getting pissed about the things you're about to talk about?
Yeah, I'm totally.
I'm
always angry. It's always, I'm either on idle where I'm not in gear at all, or I'm angry. Those are my two speeds. So it's like, I'm just here waiting for you to finish your question, and then I'm going to get fifth gear anger right now, because that's wrong. That's 100% wrong.
I'll explain it quickly and we don't have much time, but I'll say, there is, if you study generations, there's one called Generation Jones. So think of it. Max was 9 when we landed a man on the moon, and they were 9 thinking, all right, this is going to be great. And then we did nothing. Like, we were just like financialized everything and tore it apart. And we're like, hey, I thought I was going to the moon. I thought I would be living on Mars by now.
Yeah, 1969 was peak. You had Mets won the World Series. The Jets won the Super Bowl. Man landed on the moon. And that was peak America. I was 9 years old, and now everything has gone to shit since then.
And that's the source of his anger.
That's it. I want to get back.
And then everybody just became a banker for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. I was in.
So you would be angry too. Now you don't have to.
I am angry. I know I'm already angry. I mean, I got Bitcoin, which gives it just gives me that optimism, right? And I'm too on fire for what I'm doing right now. And I mean, with price going high, it's just it's hard work having this much fun. But I will say, I think I figured something out. I think it comes down to 3 things, right? These modern monetary theorists and these central bank supporters, they're one of 3 kinds of people. Okay, they're either in on the game, they're insane, or they have a micro penis for a brain. And that's pretty much just the bottom line.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, that's it, right? That's
you are orange pilled.
Yeah. No, but I like listening to are you a millennial, I take it?
Yeah, I'm 29.
All right.
Oh, okay.
So I get a lot of inspiration now from the millennials because they're super smart and they're even angrier than I am because they got dealt a shit hand in life. You know, they were born into the 9/11 generation and then everything went downhill. So the millennials are like, you know what? We're not going to go down without a fight. And so they're like Bitcoin. They're smart, really smart. They're not like dazed and confused like the Gen X people. They're not old and tottering fools like the boomers. They're like vibrant. They're ready to go.
You know, and we Gen X and boomers and stuff, like all we did, we're like, we have a placard. We're going to tell you to stop doing the bad things to us. Yeah. And you guys are just like, I've got Bitcoin.
Yeah, right.
No placard. You don't need a placard, right?
That's right. They got the fuck you money. That's why I'm aligning myself with the millennials.
And we, you know, right when we all became kind of adults and we all entered the real world, we all realized that everything we've been told was a lie. That you know, we've been living a part of this scam, right? That, you know, it wasn't the way that we've been told, and the dollar wasn't what we've been told it was. And like you said, you know, we wanted to go make an impact, and I think like Bitcoin is just such it's rejuvenating thing to find, right? Because when you feel that you're not getting robbed every day of the week, you're free to be happy in many ways, right? You're free to not have to carry that burden, and yeah, it's huge.
Well, you're I
mean, we saw the great financial crisis, you know.
Speaking of huge, like this is our final exit, but you're the my most favorite guest, my favoriteest guest, because you're the only one that understands my theory on the micro penis, and you got it. You got it.
Right. This is going mainstream now. They're going to put this in the sales literature over at this company. It's going to be, don't be a micro penis, hire upstream data to
That's a good way to sell you.
To go big. Go big or stay home. Don't be a micro penis.
Exactly.
Okay? All those guys on the fence, they'll be like, you know what? I was not sure, but damn it, I'm gonna buy it. Hook me up right now. I'll go to the bank today and I'll get a loan because this makes sense to me. I don't have a micro penis. I'm ready to go big.
Exactly, because if you are a fracking operation and you don't have an upstream data incorporated rig, obviously you have a micro penis.
Look,
so you're
the whole
just saying
fracking business is one huge phallic symbol in the desert, right? They're just sticking up there like a freaking erection, looking for, you know, the essential quantities of life's nurture is giving oil and gas.
Okay, we have to go.
I'll drink your milkshake. What?
Can I get one? I just want to say one thing real quick. Okay, one plug, if you will. It's good for Bitcoin core development. So there's a company called Coinbeast, and they came out with a product called Coinbeast Connect, and it's a way to connect with people, you know, like to get a one-on-one kind of consultation with people. I'm on there. I'm really cheap, but I donate everything that I'm earning from that to Bitcoin core development. So I figured I'd throw it out there. Could you know, I don't know who would maybe need my advice in mining or something, but if you want to if you think about investing in mining, I'd love to talk to you and for a good cause. So that way, you know, just a good way to educate and, you know, help Bitcoin core development.
That sounds like a good idea. Max should list himself on there as a keto baker.
Yeah, I can give tips on baking keto desserts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Max, if you did it 1 hour a weekend, you just put 1 hour out there. And donate it. Heck yeah, why not, man? Bake a keto on a Saturday with a Max Kaiser fan. You know, they could pay $50 or $100, whatever, to meet with you and for a good cause.
I'll send you guys up at Upstream Data one of my keto cheesecakes. I'm so appreciating of what you've been giving us here today. We got to say goodbye. Oh, and then don't go away because you're going to help us hook this up. Unlike Rodolfo, who left us stranded on customer service. And we almost died. Rodolfo, thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
All those dinners together and the laughs and the chuckle.